Our campaign is the campaign to do that.
By the end of the night, we could have a lot better idea of who will face President Trump come November. And we welcome you on this very big political day. This is special live coverage of Super Tuesday. I'm Jonathan Elias.
I'm Michelle Marsh.
And I'm Dave Lucas.
And we are in Virginia, where polls just closed. This, of course, is one of the key states this Super Tuesday. The narrowing field of Democratic candidates held rallies and reached out to voters all weekend long and up to the very last minute today as well.
Today's race looking a lot different than we thought just a few days ago. Senator Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg suddenly dropped out of the race and threw their support to Joe Biden, who is now surging in the polls.
He came off his first victory in South Carolina. Let's take a look now at the 14 states that are up for grabs and the one U.S. territory that's holding nominating contests today: Alabama, Arkansas, California, Colorado, Maine, Massachusetts, Minnesota, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Vermont, Virginia, and American Samoa. All of those up for grabs, and it all translates to a lot of delegates.
It sure does. We're talking 1,357 delegates at stake today. That's about a third of all the pledged delegates. Now, what happens tonight sets the course of the rest of the race. Here's a look at the numbers for some of the big states. The states with the most Democratic pledged delegates up for grabs include California with 415, Texas with 228, North Carolina with 110, and Virginia with 99.
All right, let's talk about what's going on here, too. The delegate count goes this way so far. Bernie Sanders has 60, Joe Biden with 54, Pete Buttigieg, 26, but he's out of the race. Elizabeth Warren with just 8, and her home state is up for grabs tonight. Interesting to see what she does there, considering that Bernie Sanders had a huge blowout rally there today, and there were a lot of people on hand.
That would be a huge embarrassment if she were to lose that one.
Only the second time. Al Gore lost Tennessee, and then Amy Klobuchar, who also now out of the race with just 7% or 7 delegates.
We'll continue with the math a little bit now. A Democratic candidate needs 1,991 delegates to secure the nomination at the party convention in Milwaukee this July. Before the votes get counted, here's the candidate's delegate count as it stands right now. Leading the pack, Senator Bernie Sanders with 60. Former Vice President Joe Biden has 54 delegates. Mayor Pete, who dropped out, has 26. Senator Elizabeth Warren still in the race with 8. Senator Amy Klobuchar also dropped out, had 7. Michael Bloomberg, Tulsi Gabbard still do not have yet any delegate support.
All right, we're going to bring you team coverage from Sinclair TV stations all across the country in 10 of the Super Tuesday states, including live reports in Virginia, Texas, California, Alabama, and North Carolina.
And with all of that happening tonight, we have Sinclair senior political anchor Eric Bolling and a great panel of experts who will break down what's happening this Super Tuesday and what will come next. All right, so tracking all the latest information all evening is our chief political correspondent, Scott Thuman.
Yeah, Scott's joining us now from Capitol Hill, the bureau there. And Scott, so many candidates have dropped out, and there's a lot of early voting that has taken place, but still, it's crowded enough to make it very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I think that everything shifted last night. We saw how the momentum can change a little bit with the endorsements that Joe Biden pulled in, getting a bounce from that South Carolina victory that was so decisive. Then the money started to flow as well. I think $10 million in 48 hours. That's a huge haul for him. But take a look at how tonight can totally alter the landscape when you look at the map. 14 states, as you pointed out, and let's talk about the biggest ones really briefly: California, Texas, North Carolina, and of course Virginia. Here they are, sorry, right here. And if you look at how many just those 4 states are going to bring in, that's 852 delegates. That is 5 times more than we have seen so far in this entire race handed out. A lot at stake this evening. At polling places around the country today, and fresh in voters' minds, may not be Super Tuesday, but Super Tuesday Eve, when Joe Biden got a bounce provided by those who dropped out.
This isn't an election to spend all our time in the battle for the soul of the Democratic Party. We're in the battle for the soul of this country.
What Biden's camp is calling Joe-mentum, in some cases could be too late to have an influence. Just in California alone, there were more than 3 million early votes cast before Buttigieg, Klobuchar, and Steyer dropped out. Bernie Sanders continues to see committed and impressive crowds, and many believe he may still emerge with more delegates at the end of the night.
We have got to move toward a government which believes in justice, not greed.
And what this day could also do is help determine if one candidate will forge a path to the nomination or indicate a long road ahead, setting course for a possible contested convention where no one secures enough delegates to be the nominee, and a divided Democratic Party risks alienating some voters in a brawl over who sits atop the ticket.
Nobody gets a majority, and then you go to a convention, and then we'll see what happens.
Do you want a contested convention?
Well, I don't think that I can win any other ways.
It's a pretty interesting admission from Mike Bloomberg there, who, remember, by the way, this is the first time we're going to see him on the ballots because he skipped the first 4 states and was gambling pretty much everything on having a big show tonight. People will be very curious to see where he has success if he does. Elizabeth Warren is projected to pick up some delegates tonight, but keep in mind, she has not won any since Iowa. Big drought for her, and that spells trouble. And Tulsi Gabbard still running as well. So you've got some serious X factors in how all of this is going to play out tonight.
Scott, thanks very much for that. We should let you know, because as the numbers start to come in and as we start getting some of the contests being called, we'll let you know what's going on. Right now, Reuters is already coming out and declaring that Sanders will win Vermont. Not a stretch, that's his home state. But that Biden will win the Commonwealth. He'll win Virginia tonight. So we'll have to see when the polls close and they add it all up.
And nice to see some early returns.
Yeah.
I mean, polls still open in many places. So.
No question about it. And it's some of the polls, like in Tennessee, they're going to keep them open an hour later because of the tornadoes that they had there last night, so they can let folks find out where they're supposed to vote and then find their way there. Now, there are 99 pledged Democratic delegates in the Commonwealth of Virginia, so that's a decent share.
Yeah, a big bucket there. Our Northern Virginia Bureau Chief Tim Barber is live in Alexandria at a Joe Biden watch party. So, Tim, polls just closed at 7 o'clock. What are you hearing from voters there?
Right now, the projection is that Joe Biden won the Commonwealth, and that is why the restaurant here at the Java Grill in Alexandria is so fired up. So many people dropped out of the race within the last 48 hours that it changed the landscape of this race. So today, when voters went to the polls between 6 a.m. and 7 p.m., Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Mike Bloomberg, Elizabeth Warren, and yes, Tulsi Gabbard was still in the race. Those were on voters' minds. Those were the candidates on voters' minds when they went into the polls. Now, Joe Biden was one of the favored folks to win this race because the former vice president is a more moderate, and Virginians tend to elect more moderate Democrats here compared to Bernie Sanders, who lost against Hillary Clinton in the last cycle. But it appears that Joe Biden has indeed won Virginia. That's what the polls were showing. But again, the polls, there were too many polls out there, so we didn't really have a good sense. And with so many people dropping out, it was definitely something that could have been a little bit up in the air. But it looks like Joe Biden has indeed won Virginia. So we're going to stay here, talk to some of these supporters. These are the folks who have been in with Joe, with the former vice president since day one. And so we're going to talk to them. We're going to have much more coming up later today. Reporting live in Alexandria, Tim Barber, ABC 7 News.
All right, Tim, thanks very much. Let's bring in Dave Lucas and talk about this. That doesn't come as a huge surprise.
No.
Everybody's sitting on the sidelines watching for California and Texas.
Talk about Virginia a little bit, though, right now, because that's obviously there are 2 projections here. Bernie Sanders winning in his home state, that's not a big deal. But Joe Biden winning in Vermont, in Virginia, though, that may be a little bit more of a surprise. And here's what we know. There were a couple of polls out, but everything, of course, then changed on Saturday when Joe Biden won big in South Carolina. All of a sudden yesterday, when you had 2 big presumptive candidates drop out and throw their support over to Joe Biden, the Data for Progress took a look at a couple of good polls and came up with today Biden with 39%, Sanders with 24%, Bloomberg with 18%, Warren with 17%. What's significant about that is you've got 4 candidates in these polls, all of which at the 15% and above threshold. That means they all stand to win delegates. Yes, it appears that Joe Biden is going to win in Virginia, but of those 99 delegates that are available, they might get split up 4 ways. Biden would get the lion's share of them, but still, its proportionality is the big deal now, and that looks like everybody benefits if, in fact, these poll numbers hold true.
And you hear so many people talk about the no majority, that possibility,
yes.
And we could see that tonight.
It's entirely possible. There were any number of ways this could go. And frankly, before Saturday, it looked like that Bernie Sanders might win big on Super Tuesday and could go into the next round a week from tonight. There's 7 other primaries that come up a week from Super Tuesday with a considerable, not a majority yet, but a plurality of delegates and all the momentum in the whole world. What is going to be interesting to see now is which trumps what. Is it momentum that's the big thing?
Well, it's certainly not money, because Bloomberg, this is his first time out of the gates, and this is a guy who spent $500 million to show up on radar, and right now we're not seeing it.
You figured what the second mo was there. It is in fact money, and it's not working as well as it had. Or at least it looked like it was going to. Saturday changed everything.
But this is the first true
That's
test
the
for
dividing.
Bloomberg.
This is the first time he's showing up on any ballots.
Tonight,
yeah,
so
he's
we'll
the dark horse,
see.
no question about it. All right, Dave, thanks very much for that. And in just about 15 minutes, polls are going to be closing in North Carolina, and that's where there are 110 Democratic pledged delegates.
Justin Hinton from our station in Asheville, North Carolina, joins us now. And Justin, how are things going across the Tar Heel state there?
Yeah, largely they're going quite well. Of the 2,670 precincts, there's been an issue at only one. Now, there was a printer problem at one polling place in Bertie County. That's in the northeast part of the state. Now, that issue interrupted voting for about 30 minutes. 2 people waited and cast ballots. 6 decided to leave. So Bertie County Board of Elections officials asked the state board to extend the vote at that one precinct by 30 minutes. The state board voted to do so, so voting at that one precinct in Bertie County will end at 8 p.m. But we also wanted to look at turnout when it comes to early voting. In the 2016 primary, nearly 686,000 people cast ballots at one-stop early voting sites. Well, this time around, that number increased significantly to 779,000 people. If you're doing the math, that's nearly 100,000 more people casting ballots this time around when it comes to one-stop early voting. Now, here in Buncombe County, this is really Bernie Sanders territory. If you go back to the 2016 primary, he lost only 3 of the county's 80 precincts. So we'll have to see if it's a repeat tonight. Reporting live in Asheville, North Carolina, I'm Justin Hinton for ABC 7 News.
Justin, thanks very much for that. And, you know, one Super Tuesday state that we had expected to get a report from this evening was Tennessee. They were supposed to close up at about 7 o'clock, but that did change, and here's why. Look at the devastation left behind by not one but 2 tornadoes that came down in the middle of the night. At least 25 people killed by these tornadoes. A number of other people were hurt. A lot of buildings destroyed. Some polling stations had to be closed because they were damaged beyond repair. And a judge just ruled that polling stations will remain open at least an extra hour to give those folks who want to vote a chance to find their polling spot and get out there and cast their ballot. A few places are even going to stay open until 11 p.m. Eastern time, and you can understand that change that was made given the circumstances.
Absolutely. They are facing so much. It's just a tough situation to think about voting when you've lost loved ones, family members even. All right, right now we want to head a little bit further south to Alabama. A crowded field of Republican candidates is working to upseat Democratic Senator Doug Jones in the U.S. Senate race. Among those Republicans is former Attorney General Jeff Sessions.
Yeah, Lauren Walsh from our Birmingham station. She's live right now at the Jeff Sessions watch party in Mobile, Alabama. And Lauren, this is an interesting race there because Jeff Sessions was on the outs with Donald Trump. Now it seems he's back in his good graces. It'll interesting to see what kind of effect that might have for the voters in the state.
It's expected to have a big effect. Sessions has 6 Republican competitors for the seat that he had for 20 years. And this race has largely been a competition about who supports President Donald Trump the most. Sessions' opponents in this race include former Auburn football coach Tommy Tuberville, Congressman Bradley Byrne, and also former Alabama Supreme Court Chief Justice Roy Moore, who won this nominee in 2017 and was later defeated by Democrat Doug Jones. Now, candidates here, they know how popular the president is in Alabama, and they have done all they can to try to prove they would be the greatest help to him in Washington. Sessions has faced criticism for his time as Attorney General, as he was forced to resign after the president fiercely criticized him for his recusal from the Russia investigation. But most of Sessions' ads have highlighted his support for the president. Now, if one candidate does not get more than 50% of the vote, there is expected to be a runoff in this race. It is scheduled, if needed, for March 31st. Reporting live in Mobile, Alabama, Lauren Walsh for ABC 7 News.
All right, Lauren, thank you for that. All right, one more time, let's take a quick check of the latest numbers. Virginia, projections are coming out. Joe Biden has just been declared the winner in the Virginia primary. Again, that's a projection that was being made by Reuters. And at this point, A lot of folks are going to be talking and trying to boil that down. It's like, why was he so successful in Virginia when the only win he had was South Carolina up until now?
So 13 more to go. 13 more states will be watching. Let's turn to Eric Bolling with our panel of experts. Eric, Super Bowl Sunday has nothing on Super Tuesday.
Well, thank you, Michelle, Jonathan, and Dave. So with us, we have Misha Cross, good friend of the show, also Ari Aramesh, Holly Turner, and Julio Rivera. Now, Misha, they just called it, or they temporarily called it. Looks like Joe Biden will have won Virginia. Let's take a listen to President Trump. I had the opportunity to speak with President Trump on Friday regarding Joe Biden. Listen.
Biden is Biden. You know, he said 150 million people were killed by guns in our nation. That's half our population. Nobody told me about that. If I ever said that, they'd run me out of town. I'd be gone.
He's lost a few steps, I think, Mr. President. He can't figure out his numbers. Sometimes he can't even figure out what state he's in.
I don't quite get it, but you know, whatever. 6 times with the wrong states. You do that, that's game changing.
It's a pattern.
But not for him. And then Bernie is Bernie, right?
So what do you say, Misha? Biden wins. He's got new life. South Carolina breathed a little fresh air into his campaign. Is this for real?
Absolutely. I think that what ended up happening with the Democratic consolidation, we saw Klobuchar and Buttigieg drop out, but we've also seen a coalescing around Biden as being the heir apparent, as being the moderate that Democrats want to see moving forward. I think that's going to bring fundraising dollars. It's obviously bringing a lot of endorsements, and he has secured the black voting bloc, which is essential to win the Democratic Party nomination.
The man has had so many slip-ups recently. He forgot the second line to the Declaration of Independence yesterday. Tell me about this guy. Do we really want Joe Biden, with what's going on, with his finger on the possible trigger of nuclear weapons?
Yeah, I mean, most Americans don't, which is why he hasn't done well thus far. But I mean, the Democratic Party is struggling. Who are they going to nominate? And at this point, it's like, well, maybe that's better than Bernie. I don't know. It's certainly not everyone's first choice, and man, the president is going to have so much fun with this if Biden ends up being the nominee.
Or Ari, what about Bernie? I mean, it seems to be that the establishment Democrats, also the mainstream media, is pushing the vote towards Biden because they fear a Bernie Sanders versus President Trump.
You know, if Donald Trump can have his fingers on the nuclear button, so can Mickey Mouse. So at this point, Bernie Sanders or Donald Duck, either one can be in the White House, and that would make a lot more sense.
Joe Biden just asked for the vote for his U.S. Senate seat. He ran for the Senate for the first time 48 years ago.
And we have a president who looks directly into the sun and says, "Duh, we got to come down from Mars and talk about facts." The president of the United States is calling. We say what? Pod calling the kettle black? You got to be kidding me.
Who can beat Trump on the left?
I think Joe Biden has a pretty good chance of solidifying and consolidating votes from the moderates, but I got a problem here. You guys on the right are a lot more realistic. You voted, the evangelical right voted for a guy who's never stepped foot in a church, 3 divorces, and pays off porn stars. But my side, when we don't get Bernie, we don't vote for him. And that's a problem. So we got to be realistic. Supreme Court justices matter. Vote for any Democrat.
President Trump is polling very high with minorities because of what he's done with the economy. Yes. He's polling extremely well with Hispanics. He's doing very well with African American. With that type of polling going forward, who can beat President Trump?
No one can. And this is a particularly bad situation for the Democrats. It's damned if you do, damned if you don't. The most popular candidate that they have, obviously, is Bernie Sanders, but he can't win with just a plurality of Democrats. All the moderates are going to get, I think, behind Biden here. I expect Biden to have a good night. It's going to be all about Biden and Bernie tonight. But what are they going to do? Are they going to have a contested convention? Are they going to undermine a third of Democrats? That's going to prove wildly unpopular on election night in November for Biden if he gets the nomination, and then Bernie doesn't have enough of the Democrat base to win.
You should work with me here. So it's projected, the early polls look like Bernie Sanders was going to do very well in California. Massive, 415 delegates up for grabs in California. Joe Biden was hoping to hit the 15% threshold so he can get any delegates at all. If Bernie Sanders locks down California, what do the Dems do?
I think that Bernie Sanders is going to win California. I don't think that there is going to be a huge difference between his delegate count and Biden's.
Let's game theory
again,
this out.
South Carolina changed a lot of things, and now people see that Biden is structurally someone who, again, diverse communities can get behind, and I don't think that momentum is going to stop.
Interesting that you say diverse communities, because I'm looking at younger voters. Younger voters, everyone seems to want the younger voters. Younger voters don't want Biden. They are flocking to the Bernie Sanders vote. Biden is now doing very well in people over 65 years old.
And that's what I talk about.
Every other demographic age group It's a Bernie vote.
And that's what I'm talking about our problem on the progressive side. Bottom line is this: no matter who wins the Democratic nomination, because of the Supreme Court, federal judges, circuit court judges, we have to vote for him. We let go of Hillary because people were not happy about the Democratic sort of insiders doing the bidding.
What do you mean you let go of Hillary? She won the nomination.
Can we not pretend like the most consistent voters are those who are older voters? As much as I'm a millennial, I love my millennials, but millennials don't come out to vote in consistent numbers.
I want to get back to you two on the left here. Holly, talk to us about a party that claims to be the party of inclusiveness, diversity, of younger, of new ideas. Right now, their two leaders are likely the only two who have a shot right now, as we speak, are older white guys.
Yeah, and there were plenty of other options at the beginning of this primary process, and the Democrat voters rejected them. They rejected the women. They rejected the minority primary candidates. It really shows that the Democrat Party doesn't have their trust and their faith, that they can't put somebody like that to represent their people. And we see now, as you mentioned, the polling numbers for Trump in some of these minority communities are just, I mean, they're through the roof. It could be historic.
I take no lectures. I take no lectures from the party of Donald Trump on diversity.
Those communities.
No lectures.
I can't even name 5 world capitals. I just take no lectures.
Stop. You have two 70-plus-year-old white males who are your nominees.
And Donald Trump is a 34-year-old marathon runner.
But the leftists always said they're the party of inclusiveness, the party of minorities, the party of
So we agree that the Republican Party is the party of exclusiveness, right? So you guys want to keep the blacks out, keep the Jews out, keep the minorities out. So is that it?
Ari, stop. You had a gay male he just stepped away. You had several females that stepped away.
So
you're done. You're down to two white, older
first
males.
vice presidential nominee ever, Geraldine Ferrara, Democrat. First, you all, and look at the Republican reaction. And you guys talk about inclusivity.
What happened to Cory Booker? What happened to Kamala? What happened to Castro? We had Ted Cruz. We had Marco Rubio. We had Ben Carson.
All right,
and they all did well.
So hold on. You have to admit, you have to admit that the 17 that ran for president in 2016 on the Republican side were far more diverse.
You can talk about open markets and free business, but I take no lectures on diversity and civil rights. I just take no lectures.
About bringing the person forward who Democratic voters believe stood the best chance against winning against Donald Trump. And at the end of the day, even diverse voters did not feel that several of those candidates, the women, the early minority candidates, were the best, could be able to outlast and make it to Super Tuesday. Turns out they were all actually right. So I don't think that there's a problem there with us making it to this point and they're not necessarily being the same candidates that we started with.
All right. I'm as they say, asking for a friend. I'm going to send it back over to you, Jonathan and Michelle. Thank you, guys. We'll be back with you in a little bit later in the show.
All right, Eric. Thanks very much. And that's the interesting thing about this election that beats out previous elections is the passion that's behind this.
Yeah.
People aren't just sitting on the sidelines or in the middle. They're right in the thick of it, either dead left or dead right, and they have a lot of passion behind them, and you're going to see that throughout. And this is just Super Tuesday, mind you. There's more coming as we go along the primary season. They finally choose a candidate, and then the two candidates from the Republican Party and the Democratic Party square off.
Absolutely. A long road ahead. So let's talk about what's happening tonight. Polls close in Massachusetts at 8 o'clock, so a little over half an hour left for them. Our station in Providence, Rhode Island, is covering Massachusetts tonight. Brian Crandall has a look at Senator Elizabeth Warren's home state and what voters are expressing.
The turnout here in the city of Fall River has been surprisingly low today. They're hoping for a rush before the polls close. Now, one would think that Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren would have the advantage here in her home state. But recent polls have shown a close race here with Bernie Sanders, and Sanders leading some of those polls. Sanders was the only candidate to campaign in Massachusetts leading up to Super Tuesday. He held rallies in the state Friday and Saturday. Of course, it'll be interesting to see the effect of several candidates dropping out in recent days, though more than 200,000 voters in Massachusetts cast their ballots last week during the early voting period. Polls close here at 8 o'clock. Reporting in Fall River, Massachusetts, I'm Brian Crandall for ABC 7 News.
And that was a quick footnote in Brian's report, but we haven't yet talked about the significance of those candidates dropping out. Amy Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg.
Especially with early voting.
Yeah, on the eve of Super Tuesday. Right. So all of those early votes are already casted, and we don't know which way they went, but
and Klobuchar bailed out in Minnesota. Yeah, Minnesota's up for grabs for delegates tonight. They're a part of Super Tuesday. She bailed out, and there was some concern that she wouldn't carry the state, that they thought Bernie Bernie Sanders would. Massachusetts, on the other hand, Elizabeth Warren is very much in this race, doesn't have any delegates, but if she loses her home state, that is a huge embarrassment for her, probably the end of her run after tonight. So a lot clearer picture maybe coming after tonight, especially with all the polls coming in and giving an idea of how many delegates are going in which direction.
Yeah, at 8:30, polls will close in Oklahoma, where there are 37 Democratic pledged delegates there.
Maureen Glisovic with our sister station, Oklahoma City, has the very latest from there.
It's Super Tuesday here in Arkansas, where thousands are expected to cast their ballots. Of course, many interested in the presidential race this year. Now, as far as some early voting numbers we've received, nearly 24,000 Arkansans have cast their ballots. That's around 18,000 Democrat ballots and 5,300 Republican ballots. Now, we are being told by our election officials that not as many people cast their ballots during early voting this year than they did 4 years ago. But of course, our polling places are open until 7:30 p.m. Central Time, and we're going to continue to monitor this as the numbers start rolling in. I'm Maureen Glisovic in Little Rock, Arkansas for ABC 7 News.
All right, a lot of people are curious what's going to happen in California, because you talk about a delegate-rich state. That's the mother lode right there. After that state moved its primary up by months to play a bigger role in the presidential nominating process, they used to go at the end. And when 40 million people are parked in one place, they're like, wait a minute, we should have a bigger voice in what happens here.
And tonight they do. Rich Rodriguez with our station in Fresno, California, joins us now live. And Rich, California has the most delegates at stake. We're talking 400, more than 400.
It is delegate rich in California. Good evening, Jonathan and Michelle. You know, this is the ballot. There are 20 presidential candidates on the California Democratic ballot. But right now, this is Super Tuesday, and only the 4 frontrunners matter. Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, and Mike Bloomberg giving last-minute voters a reason to check their name. California is delegate-rich. 415 are on the line Super Tuesday. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders is considered the frontrunner. He has the support of Latinos, young and liberal voters, plus a ground game with thousands of volunteers. Former Vice President Joe Biden has been nearly MIA in California, with only one campaign office in East Los Angeles. Since Friday, he and his wife Jill have been zigzagging the state, giving speeches and meet and greets. Former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg has spent $78 million on campaign ads in California. He also has 24 campaign offices in California. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren opened campaign offices in Oakland and Los Angeles 4 months ago. Before then, polls had her in the lead, a lead that has since vanished. Many Californians received their ballots weeks ago, so a significant number voted early and before other presidential candidates dropped out of the race. There have been some snags on Election Day in California. The computer system up and down the state went out anywhere between an hour to 2 hours. Everything running smoothly again. The polls close tonight at 8. Rich Rodriguez, ABC 7 News in Fresno.
Rich, thanks. You know, in Iowa, it's one thing when you have a very small population having a problem tabulating the results.
That in California,
you don't want that problem.
Glad they got it back up and running. All right, let's take another look at the latest numbers coming in for Virginia. Joe Biden, the projected winner, with 55%. Bernie Sanders, 23%. Elizabeth Warren with 10%. Michael Bloomberg with 9%. Back now to the Virginia primary. Again, those closed at 7 o'clock.
Michael Bloomberg showing up barely on radar, and he has spent over $500 million.
And you have to hit that 15% threshold in order to collect any delegates. So they're going to be watching those numbers very closely with his camp, because, you know, they have so many outreach points throughout Virginia. And if it doesn't yield much, doesn't say much for his campaign.
His machine in California, he has more offices in California, I heard, than other candidates combined.
Very organized campaign.
And so far not doing a whole lot. All right, Christina Thompson with our Lynchburg station. She's joining us live in Richmond at the Virginia Department of Elections. You know, Christina, are you hearing about any voting issues that we've had here in the Commonwealth?
You know, I haven't been hearing about any voting issues, but the Virginia Department of Elections, they are expected to release all of the unofficial results within the hour. Now, I'm actually on their website right now. I just refreshed the page. 23% of votes have been tallied, and of those 23%, Joe Biden coming in at 55.54% of the tallied votes. Now, some of you voters might be wondering how accurate these results are as they begin to be updated. If you remember about 4 months ago in the 2019 November elections, the Board of Elections website glitched and posted inaccurate election result data. We asked the Richmond Registrar office about this.
But if there is a glitch, we're still tabulating internally here as well. So hopefully there won't be. I do understand the state has been improving its system.
About a week ago, the BOE made a statement saying Virginians should feel confident that their votes will be counted accurately and that they have worked to remove unsecure voting systems from service. Now, the BOE commissioner is expected to give an update here at 8 p.m. We will be in that meeting and we'll bring that to you at 10. Live in Richmond, Christina Thompson, back to you.
All right, Christina, thanks very much. Let's bring in back Dave Lucas to talk some more about politics because you've been around it a long time.
And Dave, you're going to speak specifically about a key number, a target, if you will, that all of the campaigns will be watching to see if their candidate hits.
That's exactly right. On Super Tuesday, and as we watch, the most important rule tonight is, can you get to 15? That's the name of the game. Candidates need 15% of the votes cast to get a proportion of the state's delegates. Now, earlier, we talked about California. Well, the Sanders campaign is counting on a big win to get the lion's share of the 415 delegates at stake there. But if 4 candidates get to 15%, and by the way, that's what the Data for Progress polling average is showing right now, all 4 would divvy up those 415 delegates. Same thing in Texas, where there are 228 delegates at stake. And depending how much ground Biden has made up since last night in Dallas, the chances of a contested convention might be going up dramatically. Guys, it's always good to win, but for some candidates tonight, it may be better just to get to 15 because at least you have reason to stay in the race a little while longer.
You know, the pollsters have been talking about what's happening and everybody knows how much is up for grabs on Super Tuesday, but they said California and Texas, which are really delegate rich, both of those seem to be trending toward Bernie Sanders. If he comes away with a win both in California and Texas, that puts a huge dent in every other candidate.
And again, that was the conventional wisdom. When you looked at the majority of the polls, Real Clear does a really good synthesis of all the polling and come up with an average. And before yesterday, it looked really good in Texas for Bernie Sanders. As of today, and this the Data for Progress polling, which there are 3 good polls out now that started on Saturday and ended last night. All of a sudden, it's not Bernie in Texas, it is Biden. So what's going to be interesting here, you want another number? 600. That's kind of the line everyone is talking about. If Bernie Sanders comes out tonight with 600 delegates, and that's a lot of delegates, he's done really well. If he does more than that, he's done particularly well. If he gets less than 600 delegates, this is suddenly a problem, and then it brings Biden into this as well.
And you look at the optics, I mean, that wave of endorsements that Biden received after South Carolina, that may be what essentially pushes him over the line and have a good night tonight.
And plus the debate, you know, that along with the debate, it's all pushing away from Sanders, not necessarily to Biden, just away from Sanders.
And that was sort of an interesting thing, and the panel talked a little bit about that too. Who do you support here? Is it necessarily the oldest of the candidates? Well, until you suddenly then had the 2 leading contenders, both of them being just as gray as I am, that's...
They've got you by 20 or 30 years.
You're a little too kind. Let's real quickly look at all the results for Virginia right now, because we've got these are with 9%. The statewide total, according to the State Elections Board, is actually more than that. But these are the numbers we've got. They have given it to Biden. Bernie Sanders at 23. Now, those are the only 2 above 15%.
That's right.
As it stands now, Elizabeth Warren, Mike Bloomberg, Gabbard, and Klobuchar are well below all those numbers. Here's the problem with numbers early on. It's 7:34. They are still voting, I feel fairly certain,
but look at those numbers. If you were to add all of them up, Because those folks aren't on the ballot anymore. They're not, well, they technically are, but they're not in the race.
It's not significant numbers. What we're going to see is, you look at Rova and Nova in this state. Nova, Northern Virginia. Rova, the rest of Virginia. And for the Democrats, Rova means Tidewater. It means Richmond and the suburbs down there. And it means the outer suburbs.
Well, and keep in mind, in Virginia, Republicans can vote for a Democrat.
They can cross
over.
So
a lot of Republicans were talking about, there was a movement, you saw it on social media, they're saying, hey guys, go vote for Sanders. Vote for the person you think that will get crushed by Trump.
I heard a very interesting argument from the guy who ran the Trump campaign 4 years ago, who said we tried to do the same thing.
Sure.
Against Hillary Clinton, and it didn't work then, and there's no reason to think it's going to work.
Well, it's always a crapshoot. You never know what people are going to do.
It's hard enough to get people out to vote.
For the candidate they want, much less the one they don't want. You're right.
Dave, thanks very much for that. Polls close at 8 o'clock in Oklahoma. That's where there are 37 Democratic pledged delegates. Erica,
Stanish with our station in Oklahoma City has an update on campaigning taking place there today.
Voters in all 77 counties in Oklahoma have been heading out to their voting locations today for the presidential primary election campaign. Now, Oklahoma generally doesn't get a lot of attention because it is a red state, but we have had several Democratic nominees visit the Sooner State, some even this morning, including Joe Biden's wife, Jill Biden. She spoke to a crowd at a local restaurant and bar here, saying, imagine in 2021 turning on the news and not hearing about a late night tweet storm from the president. She said the country is ready for a change. Meanwhile, actor Danny Glover and Mayor Gus Newport were in Oklahoma campaigning on behalf of Senator Bernie Sanders, talking about the power of your voice. Mike Bloomberg has also made 3 stops in Oklahoma looking to capitalize after sitting out in the first 4 races. Now getting back to Oklahoma, not getting much attention, and it's mainly because we have 37 delegates up for grabs compared to states like California, who have 415, and Texas with 228. Now we may be getting more candidates visiting, and that's because the races are so tight. Again, voters have been out all day today, and the polls close tonight at 7 o'clock Central Time. Reporting in Oklahoma City, I'm Erica Stanish.
All right, voters in Maine, meantime, they have less than 30 minutes to vote before polls close there.
And that's New England. It's up Maine, parked next to Vermont. You think that Bernie would do well there. Marissa Bodner with our station in Portland, Maine, has more on voter turnout there.
Turnout has been steady at this polling place in Portland today. You can see the lines right here. And voters tell us one of the biggest issues bringing them out, of course, is the presidential primary. It's a closed primary here in Maine. It's also the state's first in 20 years. And at some points, the line to register has actually been longer than the line to vote. The Secretary of State's office says that's because Maine has a high number of unenrolled voters. So many today are registering to be able to cast a ballot in the Democratic primary. There are 24 delegates up for grabs here in Maine. Bernie Sanders is leading in the polls, but despite the shakeup earlier this week of candidates dropping out, voters we spoke with today tell us they already had their mind made up.
They're all checking out now.
Did that change your vote at all,
No,
the shakeup?
no. I really want him to. I think he's the only one that can beat Trump.
It didn't for me. No, I saw that their names were all on it, and I know people who voted early. That affected their decision, but no, it didn't affect mine.
Reporting in Portland, Maine, I'm Marissa Bodner for ABC 7 News.
That's the problem with voting early. There's a lot more names to choose from.
I know.
And by the time those ballots are getting counted up, those names have long since gone.
So much has changed since Saturday. Well, there you go. Sinclair's chief political correspondent, Scott Thuman, has been tracking Super Tuesday results as they come in. So, Scott, what can you tell us about the latest numbers?
Well, it's interesting because you just talked about early voting and how if you've put in your word before you saw everyone from Pete Buttigieg to Amy Klobuchar to Tom Steyer getting out, you may feel like your vote may have been wasted, but it certainly didn't have an impact on that Biden versus Sanders rundown. If we take a look at Virginia, it's interesting because when you look at what happened here and what unfolded, yeah, it was going to be a tight race. A lot of people felt that Biden may have the inside track. But think about the endorsements that he got. Now, granted, this is a state where Hillary Clinton won against Bernie Sanders pretty handily, and sometimes that Clinton contingency follows on to the Biden one. But think about it. You had Terry McAuliffe, who just, by the way, tweeted out Virginia picks presidents, and that's what we did tonight. You had Don Beyer, local here in Northern Virginia congressman. And then, of course, the big name Tim Kaine, who was on that ticket with Hillary Clinton. And does that pay off? Well, it looks like it may have. Now, we already saw a little bit of momentum for him anyway, but nonetheless, it's important to watch. And then if you talk about some of the other numbers that we're seeing so far, North Carolina, interesting, right? Because everyone wants to talk about states as if they are completely separate by that border. You know, we define them as kind of one entity. But look at what we saw in South Carolina. Right in this section, big votes for Joe Biden. It is not a shock then that that's going to carry over in some of these other sections of North Carolina. You know, the emotion or the momentum doesn't end right at the border.
That is certainly true. Scott, thank you. And as I'm looking at those numbers at the bottom of the screen, I'm just wondering the strategy that Bloomberg had coming in so late in the game and whether he could have been a more viable candidate. Of course, the night is still early, but had he gotten earlier?
Sure, absolutely, and that's a big issue because if you take a look at the rundown of the candidates right now, let's just look for example. I mean, okay, so Bloomberg gets in really late, and then he's not on the ballot for the first 4 states. That's a big problem, and he knew that that was going to be an uphill battle for him. But also, if we talk for just a second about Joe Biden, not just in a particular state, but in all the Super Tuesday states. Keep in mind, Joe Biden for more than 4 weeks didn't make a single appearance in Super Tuesday states except for fundraisers. That could hurt him, especially as we continue to look west to states you've pointed out like California, Utah, Colorado. You need to show up if you want to get that vote. Hillary Clinton learned that from Wisconsin in the 2016 presidential
Yeah,
race.
states she ignored, exactly.
Scott, can I jump in just for a second? Because you're right about Virginia, but there are 2 states, Oklahoma and Arkansas, 2 places that could be good news for Bloomberg tonight. He spent a lot of time and a lot of money in both of those places, and they're kind of off the beaten path a little bit, but they are in that sort of southern crescent where Joe Biden expects to do very well tonight, and it seems to me that if he wants to play interrupter, that might be the spot he does it.
It is, and that may give him enough, let's say, encouragement to keep going, right? But Arkansas, they haven't had a lot of great polling out of Arkansas.
You're right.
Very minimal. And that's because not a lot of money was spent there, so they're not polling heavily there. You know, look, this is a state where Bernie Sanders had a really difficult time in 2016. Granted, he was going against Hillary Clinton, which obviously they've got their namesake there in Arkansas. But that means it's a tough state for him. That may be that opportunity for Bloomberg, like you're talking about, perhaps Oklahoma as well.
Scott Thuman, we appreciate your help up on Capitol Hill deciphering all what's happening tonight. It's Super Tuesday. Now they're starting to add up the votes of people spending the day out casting their ballots. And so much up for grabs, over 1,300 delegates, closer to 1,400 delegates up for grabs.
Yeah, a long night here on the East Coast because out in Utah, polls close there at 10 p.m.
Yeah, so they're still in line. Christina Flores with our sister station in Salt Lake City has more on Utah's first participation in Super Tuesday.
I'm Christina Flores at election headquarters in Salt Lake County, Utah. As you can see, votes being tabulated as we speak. Utah is taking part in Super Tuesday for the first time in the hopes of being more relevant in the election process. We've seen repeated candidate visits, and just yesterday, frontrunner Bernie Sanders was here. Amy Klobuchar pulled out of the race just after her appearance here in Salt Lake City. Early voting is about on par to the 2008 totals, and recent local polls have Sanders leading over Joe Biden and Michael Bloomberg. So again, the process here of counting votes underway, and it will continue until tonight. I'm Christina Flores in Salt Lake City reporting for ABC 7 News.
All right, let's turn to another key state tonight, Texas, second behind only California in terms of delegate counts. The most delegates up for grabs, California. And Super Tuesday has become battleground Texas in several key races.
This has been a big state. And Emily Baucom now from our sister station in San Antonio Station. She joins us live with the very latest that's going on there. Emily, break it down for us. What's happening there?
Well, good evening from Texas, where the polls are still open. And if you're still in line at 7 p.m. Central, you still get to vote. Obviously, the presidential race is what's drawing people tonight. You saw Joe Biden in Dallas last night getting those key endorsements from his former competitors. But we also have our eyes on congressional races that could tip the balance in Washington.
Congressman Will Hurd, a Republican and former CIA operative, surprised the nation when he announced he wouldn't be seeking re-election. His sprawling District 23 covers much of our border with Mexico. The Democrat he beat 2 years ago, Gina Ortiz-Jones, is once again her party's frontrunner heading into November. We're also watching Texas District 21, Republican Chip Roy finishing out his first term with strong Democratic opposition. Former State Senator Wendy Davis wants his seat. You might remember her fight for abortion rights catapulted her onto the national political stage. Closer to the border, longtime Congressman Henry Cuellar is in the biggest fight of his political career. The moderate Democrat is facing opposition within his own party.
But back to the top of the ticket for a second. Here in San Antonio, there are 17 Democrats on the presidential ballot, and 10 of them have dropped out. Local election officials tell us that they have been fielding calls all day from very angry voters who want a redo on their votes. And in Texas, that is just simply not an option. Reporting live from San Antonio, I'm Emily Balk.
No mulligans when it comes to voting. Emily, thank you for that from Texas. And again, Texas and California, two of the biggest, they are the biggest states when it comes to New York and Illinois as well, but these are huge for tonight.
Absolutely, and we're just getting some new information that Biden is projected to win North Carolina.
So that would be 110 delegates for North Carolina as well. So far he's got two. If this holds up, he's got Virginia and North Carolina. Let's bring back Eric Bolling and his panel. And last time nobody got bloody, but it was close. But it is interesting the passions that are kind of dividing the left and the right in this race.
Yeah, we've told Ari to give us a little bit of breathing room here in the meantime. So I'm reading a lot on social media right now that they're calling the end to the Bloomberg race. Experts, so to speak, experts. In fact, Bill O'Reilly just tweeted Bloomberg is finished. But let's take a listen for a second to Bloomberg himself, in his eyes, what his strategy should be. Listen.
You don't have to win states, you have to win delegates. And I think what happens here is nobody gets a majority. At best, somebody will have a plurality. By definition, somebody will have a plurality. And then you go to a convention, and then we'll see what happens.
Do you want a contested convention?
Well, I don't think that I can win any other ways.
And Holly, that's important because, we're looking at Bloomberg and his numbers aren't doing great, but this isn't what it's all about for him. He seems to be the spoiler to Biden. So if he stays in this race, and God knows he's got enough money, he spent $500 million, as Jonathan points out, but the guy's worth $53 billion. So if he stays in the race so that he siphons some votes away from Biden, he gets to what he really wants, a contested convention.
Right, and I don't know that was plan A all along. We're probably on plan C right now for Bloomberg, but that's the choice that he made. Bernie, though, complaining about this contested convention, he had a seat at the table and he signed off on these rules. So for him to be complaining about it now is really, I don't really have a lot of sympathy for him. And Biden, he created his own destiny here, and maybe he's going to be the comeback kid, but it's been a long, tumultuous road for him. So the Democrats should be feeling sorry for all of their down ballot races, because those are the ones that are going to suffer.
One thing that would be a game changer, I believe, in this race right now would be President Obama endorsement.
Absolutely. I agree with you there. President Obama is going to fall on the sword of all other presidents. He has decided that he is not going to endorse until the Democratic process actually chooses a nominee. I think that it's smart. He has been called on by everybody to endorse. It's not something he's going to do. He talked to Mayor Buttigieg before he dropped out. He talked to Amy Klobuchar before she dropped out. He's been in contact with Joe Biden. He's been in contact with Bernie Sanders. He has said that he is not going to shape this election.
All right, if in the event that Bernie Sanders does become the nominee and Obama has not endorsed Biden, will it look like that Biden was not given this nomination because the lack of endorsement from Obama?
Everybody knows that how much President Obama likes Senator Biden, or Vice President Biden. Now, I just made the same mistake that Biden did running for the Senate. But everybody knows how close the two men are. Having said that, as just Amisha very well pointed out, this is a tradition. President Bush did not come out until the very end. Actually, he did not endorse Donald Trump. President Reagan, President Gerald Ford, when they were alive, they did not come out.
Those were anti-Trumpers.
No.
Bush was an anti-Trumper from the get-go.
But in 2000, they did not support McCain or Bush. Presidents Ford, President Reagan, and they were alive. A former president carries a lot of weight, and so I don't think Biden's going to feel betrayed. but most of us know a lot of votes that Biden is getting is because of President Obama in the South, in the Deep South,
Julio,
African-American
if
community.
Obama does not, in fact, endorse Biden and Bernie goes on to get the nomination, I got to think a lot of fingers will be pointing right at the former president and his wife.
Well, I mean, that's potentially true, but the fact of the matter is, I think by the time, President Obama was out of office, and then obviously we had this great economic turnaround, I don't think anybody wants Obama's endorsement. I mean, we don't want to go back to Obamanomics. Sure, it helps with the Democratic base, but I mean, listen, let's say we wind up with a contested convention, right? Let's say we have Michael Bloomberg stay in the race with all of his money. The Quinnipiac poll from February said that he was gaining traction with black voters. Then all this
From
audio
February
came
to now,
out
a lot
of
changed.
him being, of
Number
course,
one was that debate performance.
well, the debate performance, but then also all the audio that came out to stop and
I mean,
frisk
you
stuff.
ask him who's
then
the most
if you
popular
ask him,
person in the Democratic Party, he's
if
going
he
to say
buys
Donald
his
Trump.
way,
I mean,
but wait a minute, if he buys his way
Where's
to
the
more
point of this
popularity,
argument
let's say with
I
women,
want to
the
get
Bloomberg
one more
LP
topic
stuff
in
comes
before
out.
we have to go away.
Yeah.
Amisha, coronavirus. I interviewed President Trump and pointed out that there was an op-ed in the New York Times that the title was Trump virus, almost blaming Donald Trump for coronavirus. Who wins with the coronavirus, and how do the Democrats say it's his fault?
I don't agree with the titling, first and foremost, but I do think that there's something to be said about the president's mismanagement of the coronavirus. There's something to be said about him cutting the Health and Human Services budget. There's something said about him cutting the CDC budget, funneling all this money to his border wall. There's a lot to be said about this president not really taking control and trying to downplay the importance of the coronavirus and protecting against it.
I asked him, though, and I'll let both of you weigh in on this. I said, what about the $2.5 billion that Republicans want, the $8.5 billion that the Democrats want? I said, what if it goes beyond that? He said, I got whatever it takes. A quick final thought.
If one of the side effects of the coronavirus is poor judgment and horrible demeanor and poor manners, yes, I'll call it the Trump virus.
Quick thought.
Yeah, I mean, look, we don't know where this is going, but the president's going to do whatever it takes to protect the American people, and it's in his own best interest to do
All right,
so.
I'm going to send it back over to Jonathan and Michelle. Thank you, guys.
All right, Eric. That was a little tamer that time. Thanks very much, guys, for that.
Well, big question tonight is whether Bernie Sanders can recapture the momentum, because right now it seems to be with Biden.
I would also caution it's 7:51.
Yeah, it's early.
California's still voting. Texas
more
still
to come
voting. Yeah.
here. We're just starting to see meaningful numbers in Virginia. There are those 3 states, I think, that have been called: North Carolina, Vermont, and Virginia.
Right.
There will be many more. There are 14 states in all in one territory. And by the way, the Democrats abroad are also starting to vote as well tonight. That's not a big group, but they're voting as well.
Well, we're starting to see a breakdown of some of the numbers that are coming into Virginia now, which is kind of interesting. And our Annalisa Gale right now is in Alexandria with the Bernie Sanders campaign headquarters. Annalisa, what's the reaction to the results so far, especially since they've called it for Biden?
Well, Jonathan, I can tell you there is definitely some disappointment here at the campaign headquarters. Just take a look behind me. You can see they're still watching the results as they're rolling in at this hour. Sanders' team tells me that they knocked on roughly 10,000 doors today and over 100,000 doors over the weekend. In terms of rally numbers recently, roughly 10,000 attended a rally for Bernie in Springfield, Virginia, 5,000 in Richmond, and 4,000 in Norfolk. They were encouraging people to stand in line even after 7 p.m., but as we can see, some of their efforts weren't enough here in Virginia. Right now, we're joined by one of Bernie's volunteers. What do you think about the numbers so far?
You know, it's obviously a little disappointing. There's no way around that. But obviously, we're still only at the beginning of the night. There's only, a little bit reporting as of now. So, the numbers look a little rough. I think ultimately for Virginia, they'll even out to be a little bit better than they are right now. But I mean, there's still a lot of states left to go. So I think we're definitely going to, have a positive outcome at the end of the night.
Any plans to change strategies moving forward?
Well, I mean, not that I'm officially aware of. I'm based here locally in Virginia, so instead of canvassing and knocking on doors, we're just going to be focusing more on making calls to some of the other states that are going to be voting next week and in the weeks to come. So we're primarily going to be focusing more on making calls.
Thank you so much. And we'll have much more from this headquarters coming up throughout the night. We'll be here with them. We'll send it back to you.
All right. Annalisa, thank you.
Oh my gosh, 1,357, the big bucket of delegates given away today.
And you think about how much money was spent by the candidates, and when you say that, you have to bring Bloomberg right to the front of the line, because here's a guy who spent well over $500 million. Some are saying it's closer to $700 million now that he has spent on this race. I don't know what he was thinking. I mean, he said he wants a contested convention because that's the only way he's going to pull this off.
it is pretty hard to justify expenditures of that just breathtaking sum.
Don't get me wrong, TV stations and news outlets and newspapers, thrilled.
Well, one of the things
no question about that.
I'm curious about, one of the lines or the ideas, strategies for Bloomberg was that he jumped into the race because he thought that Biden wasn't capable of closing the deal. So if Biden wins tonight, that disproves his initial thesis.
It takes all
so
the
then
wind out of
does
his
he drop out?
campaign sails. I think there apparently, and there is reporting to this effect, there have been some spirited discussions today inside the Bloomberg campaign about just exactly what happens next.
Right.
And you have to think, some saying, hey, Mike, look, this ain't working.
You know, but most people from an outsider's point of view, they go and vote and they think that their vote has a huge impact, one vote.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is there's a machine. I mean, there's a process for both parties have a machine.
Sure.
And the machine usually picks their person that they favor or think has the best chance of winning.
Think they can
and
win.
they throw all the eggs in that basket. I mean, look at all the endorsements that are coming out for Joe Biden, because Bernie Sanders, who may have been the front runner at the get-go, a lot of people start digging a little deeper and they think, wait a second, you're a devout socialist. You say it yourself, you're a socialist.
Well, they need someone who could bring the electorate together, and many believe that person is Biden because Sanders is so far left.
Bernie does make the compelling argument, though. He's bringing a lot of energy, a lot of young voters into his rallies.
No question.
Into his rallies.
Right.
The trick will be to get him from the rallies to the voting booth.
That's right.
In fact, if he gets the nomination.
And we've seen that just usually doesn't translate. And the other thing about Bloomberg, too,
not.
had he lit the stage on fire in that first debate, this might be a whole different outlook right now of what's happening.
Everything is after Saturday in South Carolina and yesterday when the two big endorsements, and Beto O'Rourke was in that group as well. That's changed everything.
Yeah, that was a hard reset moment that Saturday.
All right, so we still got a while before California and Texas come in. They're still voting in those two delegate-rich states. That's going to be really the tipping point for this. So there's a lot of other states up for grab. As we've said, there's 14 states that are weighing in, but those are the two biggies. When you watch where those two go, oftentimes that's where you see the candidates go. Who do you see bails out after tonight?
I think easily there has to be Warren takes a really hard look at what she's going to do. There's a really good chance she could win her home or lose her home state, and you do that. There's no path forward.
Bloomberg goes nowhere.
I don't think so. He might win too.
TBD. Well, big night ahead. We'll be tracking all the numbers. Be sure to download our ABC7 News app. If you don't have it already, we'll be pushing all the new alerts and numbers that we get in tonight.
And we'll be here 10 and 11 o'clock with more results for you. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you later.